Good afternoon. Is it afternoon? It is afternoon, everybody. Hi, I'm John Ellerton, Chair of SMPTE UK and Director of Technical Sales at Evertz. Welcome to our next session. So let me welcome to the stage Kathleen Bryson, Alina Kudlubski, Yuanzhan Liu to talk about the ethics of synthetic presence, Orc-Layer lessons from an AI XR shared environment. Welcome to the stage.
Hello, can you hear me okay? Yeah. Hi. So I am Kathleen Bryson from De Montfort University, and I was actually one of the three originators of the Good Enough Ethics framework developed for ShareSpace.eu, which is a shared environment mixed reality program. And we'll talk about that a little bit later today. But I'm presenting today with Alina Kudlubski and Yuanzhan Liu, as said. The talk is based on joint work that was also co-authored with Anastasia Sergeeva. What we want to explore today is what happens ethically when XR and AI converge in shared environments. So the key claim of this talk and our associated paper is that once AI becomes integrated into immersive systems, we are no longer dealing with content generation or workflow support. We're increasingly dealing with something that we call synthetic presence. So others have spoken about this previously, forms of experience that feel immediate and shared, but are in fact being shaped, filtered, and partly constructed by computational systems. And that matters here because the ethical issue is no longer just what systems know, it is also what users are allowed to perceive, what is being hidden from these users, what is being emphasized, and actually how shared reality itself is being managed. So today we're going to move through three things. First, what we mean by synthetic presence in this context. Second, what three European research contexts that were ethically based can contribute to this question. And third, how a functional Orc-Layer exemplar case can perhaps help us think about responsibility, governance, and ethics by design. So I'm going to hand over to Yuanzhan now, and I'll switch the slide. There we go.
Okay. Thank you, Kathleen. And so XR already alters how people encounter environments. It does not simply display information. It reshapes the conditions under which environments are sensed, interpreted, and acts within. So AI intensifies that shift. It can personalize prompts, reorder salience, interpret emotion, guide attention, summarize context, and generate synthetic entities and alter multisensory experience in real time. So in a shared XR and AI environment, people may appear to occupy the same space while actually encountering differently perceived realities. And one person may receive calming filters, another may receive nudging prompts, and a third may interact with synthetic agents whose status is not fully disclosed. So those are not just cosmetic variations. They can change interpretation, trust, behavior, and accountability. And this is why privacy, while still essential, is not enough as a master ethical frame. So privacy tells us something important about data extraction and surveillance, but it does not fully capture questions of perceptual transparency, agency, accessibility, parity in co-presence, and platform control of the so-called reality layers. So the ethical question becomes bolder, and I would say more interesting. It is not just what the system knows, it is also how the system helps organize the world users are encountering. So a useful way to frame this is through the idea of synthetic presence. So presence in XR often means the persuasive feeling of being there. But in AI-shaped XR, presence is not only immersive, it is increasingly adaptive, inferential, and personalized. So in that sense, presence becomes synthetic not because it is unreal, but because it is partly constructed by systems that dynamically mediate what is visible, audible, salient, effectively charged, or actionable. And that becomes especially important in shared environments because co-presence usually rests on the assumption that people inhabited a sufficiently common world to coordinate action, compare claims, and attach responsibility to events. So you do not need identical perception for social life, but you do need enough overlap for disagreement, refusal, trust, and accountability to make sense. And once different users are receiving different layers of emphasis, interpretation, and support, and common reality starts to look less like a stable backdrop and more like a managed manipulation of perceptual access or parity, for good or for bad. And that, for us, is the ethical heart of the issue. So the central question is not simply whether people are immersed. It is who gets what kinds of access to reality, and at what conditions, and to whose advantage. If one person's system suppresses clutter and another intensifies alerts, that affects action. If one user's interface foregrounds some people and backgrounds others, and that affects social perception. And if a platform owner controls which overlays are permitted or blocked, then the governance of the perception becomes inseparable from infrastructure of ownership. So the synthetic presence is not only an experimental condition, it is also a political and governance condition. And with that in mind, I'm going to hand over to Alina, and who will move us through this complementary project lessons and show how these concerns materialize in practice.
Thank you, Yuxian. What we want to emphasize next, presenting and going a bit deeper into our correlated paper, doesn't propose a single ethical XR+AI solution. Instead, it merges lessons or outcome solutions of our three EU-funded research projects that we collectively closed last year. Within the context of XR that aims to tackle the problem from a different perspective. For instance, the first project, XR for Human, provides a more governance, legal guidance, interoperability, moral, legal, ethical perspective, where on the other hand, Taya XR provides and adds on a more holistic applied ethics perspective rooted and deeply rooted in real life use cases and an oriented approach within those. And last but not least, the Share Spaces project where Kathleen was involved in provides thoughts provides a good enough ethics by design framework, offering dramatic ethics by design framework, which should be embedded into existing workflows, intended to be iterative and tailored to it, and not be an afterthought. Together, as a collective, these projects' outcomes are not intended to merge into one single framework. Instead, what they rather provide, they're providing a complementary, rather building blocks, pushing to think how immersive systems and a future of an internet in everything that we are transitioning to, how we should approach it, and how ethics by design should be assessed and governed. First of all, I'm now diving a bit in the next sort of 3 slides. I'm diving into these single projects. So first of all, we have the XR for Human project that we were involved with, and it aims and intends to provide ethics of a immersive technology from a pure value-driven approach. It aims to form shared infrastructures, interoperability, and governance perspective that is context-driven, mirroring these context-based technologies which are aware about its surrounding and its origin. We are dealing with an ecosystem that is still rather fragmented. Workflows and teams often lack common benchmarks, standards, interoperability guidelines, structures, assessment practices, and comparing common workflows, potential and emerging novelty risks and harms across systems and workflows that are emerging. The XR for Human aims to provide guidelines and frameworks like the first universal code of conduct for immersive technologies, topologies of risks and harm, legal gap analysis, practical guidelines, and a more holistic view, aiming to make immersive systems and workflows more accountable. This matters in environments dealing with proprietary workflows and infrastructures which have the potential to centralize and hook you in guardrails of potential echo chambers, to share and influence what users may perceive, how they interact with each other, but forally more with its surrounding. XR for Human aims to make us aware that ethics in the context of immersive technologies is not only about context of immersive technologies, but decision during the processes the creators make, and also the connections to legal and governmental architectures that actually matter or why we should care. Next and second, we have the Taya XR project, which provides a more different but also another important perspective as it's rooted in real-life context. Within workplaces, ethical problems as potential dystopian failures, they tend to arise through design decisions within operational contexts such as structures or others that already exist. A system may work exactly as intended and still may generate issues for bystanders, asymmetrical influence, or just pure audibility. This is crucial as when XR becomes embedded in these existing workflows, it doesn't enter a vacuum. It may become entangled within a legacy of technologies, existing power relations, workplaces, hierarchies, and situated practices. Here, Taya XR aims to keep ethics grounded within existing workflows. Then we have the Share Spaces project, last but not least. It aims to address a practical issue. Teams are often given many ethical imperatives that they either become paralyzed or ethics is reduced to pure branding, compliance languages, or as we all know, they are an afterthought. And a last-minute thing before deployment that we just add on. Here, the Good Enough ethics and its ethics by design framework aims to provide this gap by treating ethics as an iterative, workable practice, rather than striving for ethical utopian perfection. It encourages teams, creators to build reflective routines and feasible benchmarks within the project lifecycle and the production workflow. Its 6 organizing principles: attachment, trust, autonomy, privacy, justice, and responsibility, valuable here, is not only this list. Good enough ethics is not treated as an afterthought. Building on ethics by design frameworks is something that should be rooted and embedded in the processes and production workflows by design. Most importantly, good enough ethics is intended to be iterative, building on worst-case future castings by developers, but also creators alike, and themselves followed by scenarios, user testing during the whole production workflow, and the use of its production life cycle. The iteration by creators and developers themselves become particularly important within processes where especially XR and AI, as we already see, fuse, where many potential harm may arise from a traumatic violation, but the guardrails, normalization of small asymmetry in attention, disclosure, control lens, social standing. A small study within this project showed that potential ethical issues are anonymously raised by developers themselves and considered throughout the design process. These findings within these projects are, the findings within this project is actually going to be published within under open access within a book, as you can see in one of the slides, next year. And now I'd like to hand over to Kathleen, who moves into our example, Orc-Layer example, and provide some more insights on that.
Thank you, Elena. So, Thank you, Elena. So where do these ethical concerns actually show up in design? So one major area is perceptual transparency and indeed behavioral nudging. So users might not know what is being altered, suppressed, emphasized, or inferred. AI systems can shape attention and interpretation without feeling overtly coercive. In immersive environments, that shaping may happen through visual overlays, through sound, haptics, prompts, or adaptive cues. So this creates a difficult ethical boundary between guidance and potential manipulation. So a second issue is accessibility. Yes, I've lumped together perceptual transparency and behavioral nudging. So the second issue here would then be accessibility and parity in co-presence, with which Yushin alluded to previously. So adaptive systems absolutely can improve for users with different sensory, cognitive, or physical profiles. But adaptability is not ethically simple if users are receiving significantly different versions of a shared scene, and those differences are invisible, unexplained, or difficult to negotiate socially. And a third issue then is platform enclosure. If the infrastructure owner determines which layers can exist, which are auditable, and which are suppressed, then the politics of visibility here becomes inseparable from platform power. So these concerns materialize not only at the level of content, but at the level of perception, participation, and control over the shared environment itself. So here we have our fictional Orc-Layer case. So to sharpen this, we're using this as a fictional, yet analytically, we feel, useful case, the Orc-Layer. So imagine an augmented reality application that overlays certain people as orcs here, or it doesn't need to be a Tolkien reference, any otherwise selectively renders aspects of a person or an environment as degraded, hostile, diminished, or monstrous. So the case here then would be stylized, but the mechanism is quite recognizable. And the point is not merely that users are seeing misinformation. The point is that social perception itself is being altered at the moment of encounter. And that matters because the visual language of monstrosity is not neutral. It can pre-structure trust, social standing, perceived threat, and the willingness to treat another person within scene as fully credible or fully human. So what this case exposes is not just a privacy problem, it's a problem of perceptual mediation, behavioral consequence, and potentially legal ambiguity. So the layer enters the relation before either participant speaks. It helps furnish conditions under which potentially one participant appears trustworthy or threatening, ignorable, or potentially less entitled to ordinary standing. So in that sense, what we're calling the Orc-Layer is a rather vivid way of showing how immersive systems can participate in the redistribution of personhood itself across a shared scene. So the Orc-Layer case also makes responsibility difficult to locate in a simple way. If a user acts aggressively towards someone who's been rendered through such a layer, so who is responsible? So the user remains an agent, obviously, but their perception has been shaped. And the developer may claim that it's playful or fictional intent, but then foreseeable effects could include dehumanization or even potentially incitement. And so the platform may host, may monetize, or may fail to constrain this layer. And the deployer may introduce the system into shared public or semi-public space without adequate safeguards. So responsibility then becomes distributed across a socio-technical stack. Oops, sorry. Back. A lightweight way that we would then support this in this analysis is what we call the SEE heuristic. So the S stands for synthetic perception, what the system changes and what users see, hear, or feel. Evaluation and governance, how these changes are assessed, compared, logged, or audited. And the final E is ethics by design, how practical guardrails are being built during development and deployment. So this is not the main contribution of our talk today, but it is useful because it reminds us that these are not just content problems, they are problems of mediated perception, governance infrastructure, and design decision making. So to conclude, the convergence of AI and XR is changing not only media systems, but the conditions of social experience. In immersive shared environments, presence is becoming increasingly synthetic and also persuasive, adaptive, and partly computationally produced. So this generates ethical challenges that go well beyond privacy, including perceptual opacity, nudging, accessibility asymmetries, fragmented co-presence, and difficulties in locating responsibility. And so as you can see today, we've drawn on XR for Human, Theia XR, and ShareSpace's good enough ethics frameworks. And our argument is that immersive ethics needs to be understood as something broader than downstream compliance. It needs to be built into the life cycle of development as an ongoing reflective practice, iterative, interdisciplinary, and attentive to the human consequences of synthetic presence. Because in XR+AI environments, the question is not really whether the systems function, it's also how they shape what it means to perceive and to act and to be together. So thank you very much. And if you have any questions, we are happy to answer them. I don't know how much time we have left. Yeah, so if anyone's got a question.
Yeah, we got 5 minutes for questions.
Feel free. I have mock questions.
Don't be so shy, guys. I know it's hard. It's a lot to take in.
So one of the mock questions I had is, how would this be, for example, different from ordinary media bias or filtering? And the way we would have answered that would be that the combination of XR plus AI, it changes the issue because the mediation becomes very spatial, it's embodied, it's ambient, And it's often difficult to detect in real time while the action is unfolding. And so that makes it a more particular case. I'm going to ask one of you a question.
No, I mean, we can also leave it. Have you guys any questions or issues or input?
No, that one.
Oh. Sorry, we didn't see you.
Peripheral.
Why don't you come
No
and
problem.
sit
Thank
with
you.
us?
Excellent share. Thank you, guys. It was just a quick question regarding, in terms of how it reflects within the ethics arena. How does it deal with things like cultural bias in terms of how people will react and stand, just body language in general?
Yeah, so actually the Orc-Layer is more an exemplar. As, for instance, it raises the issue of identity, right? And me as a user, I could, without my consent, be totally erased from existence, right? So the Orc-Layer actually tries to tackle that. What if someone would actually erase me without me saying and without me being able to opt out? There's currently, so when we've done the legal gap analysis, even though industry tends to say we are over-regulating, but when it comes to these topics, there's a huge gray gap area. And I would even go further than not just only the perception of its surroundings. So even now with the BCI wristbands that Meta just launched, they are already sort of saving the pure raw EEG data. So we already could go a layer deeper and say who owns my thoughts. And that we should start to look at these technologies as a convergence of real-time, always-on data. And it could go really dark if we're not tackling these questions while building this future rocket ship, while we're transitioning into this internet and everything with the wearables, and to prevent or at least have certain mechanisms in place.
Yeah, we're not against, also, just wanted to slightly, not a counter argument, a compliment. We're not against adaptive accessibility features. The point is not to oppose adaptive mediation. It's to ensure that the differences remain very understandable, negotiable, and accountable in shared environments. So I just wanted to reiterate.
And also, how could these things sort of affect us in our physical life with internet and everything, right? So if I'm wearing the wearables and I eat a lot of junk food, will that reflect me back on my health insurance amount because I'm in higher risk of getting a heart disease? And it touches upon the cultural bias as well. So you have a point, yes. It includes it.
Did you want to add anything?
So I think it's like what the point of this our presentation is just like we're not just like Kathleen said, we're not against the adaptive one, but what we do is just like to let people know we need to we need to let people know, it's like we won't let the bad circumstances happen before the bad circumstances become to normalize. Yeah.
It's about that.
Anything else?
So thank you so much. Yeah, thanks for a great experience.